Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Welcome back. If you have tuned in many times, I know that lots of folks have started tuning in all the time. If this is your first time tuning in, though, my name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. We're here streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. Today we're doing a Chinese hot and sour soup, which, if you aren't familiar, is a soup that you often will receive as like the free soup in a lot of Chinese restaurants, because mainly the main reason that it comes up as the free soup so often is because it is mainly made of pantry ingredients. So things like soft tofu. We're using a couple of different types of dried mushrooms. We're going to be using some green onions, and that is really about it. So the majority of this soup, it comes together with things that can be kept in your pantry for a really, really long time, which is why it is so often served as the free soup. It's because it's very easily made. In order to make ours a little bit more hearty, I'm going to be adding a little bit more protein to my version today, mainly in the use of shredded chicken, which I think adds a nice bit of heartiness than you normally get in a Chinese restaurant. Most commonly, though, the main reason that you would not see that kind of protein in a hot and sour soup is because it's too expensive. Most restaurants wouldn't want to do that because it costs a lot of money and it's too expensive to give away for free. So I like adding it, though, because it kind of makes it a little bit more hearty and more of a meal rather than an appetizer. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about hot and sour soup, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least fun to watch. I know lots of people like to just watch me chop stuff, so that's also cool too. If you haven't yet, also don't forget to hop over to the YouTube channel, where there's lots of other fun content popping up over there, including the recipe for this hot and sour soup. So almost every Tuesday nowadays, you will find that I'm cooking the recipe that came out on the YouTube channel last Friday, which comes out every Friday. There's a new recipe. So every Tuesday, usually the first stream after the recipe is released, I'll usually try and cook through that recipe as long as it's something that I can cook for dinner. So we released this recipe over on the YouTube channel a couple of days ago, and it's one of the recipes that's part of a larger series that I've been doing on Bay Area restaurant hacks, so basically deconstructing a lot of the dishes that you find in popular restaurants here in the San Francisco Bay Area. This particular dish is based off of a hot and sour soup that you can find at a restaurant in Oakland called Shandong. So if you're interested in stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to YouTube and checking out the recipe video for this hot and sour soup, because it is also very interesting. And I talk through some of the decision making that goes behind what I like to do in this soup. So if you haven't yet, if you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen, which is youtube.com/woocancook. It's right over there. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're already there. You made it. Good job. You're gonna get hungry again, yeah. I guess that's the general idea. Alright, so as with most of the savory dishes, woo, there it goes. As with most of the savory dishes that we get in Chinese food, especially wok stir fries, but generally most savory dishes in Chinese food, I'm starting out with some crushed and minced garlic, followed by some finely minced ginger. You will often find that these first two ingredients, they come up in a lot of Chinese food, almost any kind of savory Chinese food, because they work very, very well as the first two building blocks that we add anytime that we're trying to build layers of umami. So it's not necessarily that we want everything to taste like garlic and ginger, but it's because they work really, really well as the first initial fundamental building blocks of umami when we're trying to start layering. So everything else that we're going to be adding that kind of builds on top of it, that all starts with our building blocks, which are garlic and ginger. So for our garlic, you'll notice that I just gave it a really good crush with the back flat of my knife. But for our ginger, we actually do have to peel this stuff and then do actually have to go through the fine mince, and that is because you can't crush ginger. Ginger is a little bit more durable than garlic, which means that we have to do our fine mince, like so. If you don't like doing knife work, you can also get your microplanes out and just grate the stuff. That will also work really fine too. I don't like using my microplane, but that's mainly because I don't like cleaning my microplane. And if you learn how to do a fine mince, you really don't need to break out your microplane for this. Is this soup high in sodium, or is there a way to keep the flavor and lower the sodium? Yeah, just add less salt. I think that's really the answer. I think the real answer, or way to like reduce sodium, especially in soups, is to make your own broth. So make your own beef stock or chicken stock. Today we're using chicken stock. And that's because it's really hard to control how much salt is in a pre-made stock. The only way that you can really like reduce the amount of sodium in a stock is by adding more water. But the more water that you add, the more that you're going to dilute that flavor. So it's really hard to have control over how much sodium is in there, because you kind of have to have a certain level of thickness in a pre-made stock. But if you make your own stock, you can basically just not put salt in that stock at all, which is what I'm doing on a side burner right now. So I don't have a camera over my side burner, but you can see it behind me. This is this red one. That's the one that we're going to be cooking in today. But this stock pot over here on the side, that's a stock that I'm making right now, and it's really easy to make. I think maybe I can show it. No, I don't have a camera over there. But essentially what it is every time that I cut something, I throw it in a bag, which is over here. Today it's empty because I'm actually making the stock right now. And then when I throw stuff into that bag, it goes into the freezer, and then I keep it there. Every time I start cooking, I'll take it back out, and then I'll throw stuff in there. And anytime that I'm chopping something that is related to a stock, so carrots, onions, green onions, chives, ginger. Sometimes I don't always use the ginger peels, but garlic peels, all of that stuff, onions, anything that's related to a beef or veggie stock, I throw it into the bag. And then once that bag is full, I just boil a pot of water with that which is essentially like trash. And then I just boil up a pot of trash water, and that is how you make stock. If you want to make a beef or chicken stock, throw in some chicken bones too, and that's how you make that stock. And that would be, if you're asking me, I'm sorry, that kind of just tangented a little bit. But that would be my best way of approaching how to make a soup less sodium-like, is have a little bit more control over that stock, for sure. But to answer your question, this particular soup, I don't think it's actually that high in sodium. I think we're going to add a couple of layers of soy sauce to it. We're going to be using, are we using dark soy sauce today? We are using dark soy sauce. So we're going to be using a little bit of dark soy sauce, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily salty as much as it is like savory, so like flavorful. All right, so next up, I'm chopping up some green onions here. So these are all going to be used for garnish. So we're actually not going to cook any part of these green onions, which is crazy because that's a lot of green onions, but I promise that it will work. So we're also going to be using these whites as a garnish today too, which you will very infrequently see me do, because they work really well as aromatic elements in wok fries. So very frequently when I do things for wok fries, you'll see me throw these whites into the wok and cook them because they're pretty durable. You can cook the the whites of a green onion, and they'll hold together pretty well. Today we're not actually doing any frying though, which means that we have all of these whites and we don't know what else to do with them, so I'm going to actually throw them right on top. I don't think that they will actually do very well if we throw them into the stock pot. I think they'll pretty much just disappear and you won't really get anything out of it. But if we keep them super fresh and then just add them on top, I think that will work out pretty well for us. So we're giving all of these a chop, so I'm slicing up all of my green onions today. And that is our garnish. And this is going to be what we add at the very end, which means that since we are working with raw meats today, this means this is the main thing that we want to keep very far away from our raw meat, because this is the big one that we want to avoid cross-contamination with. That is because it is the only thing that is not actually going to get cooked today. So in the realm of things that are like in danger of cross-contamination and causing food poisoning, this is the big one. Make sure that things that you don't cook don't come in contact with your raw meat. So we're putting this other side of the kitchen. Do I cook every day? I would say like 6 days a week. Pretty much every day. I haven't ordered, I usually order like takeout once in a while. But unless I'm ordering takeout, pretty much cooking every day. I don't always cook like wok stir fries though. So every once in a while I'll do like a good pasta or like a good Italian dish. So I'm not always cooking Chinese food though. Okay, so that's our onions. Let's see, let's do our soft tofu next. Right, next up is some soft tofu. So I did quite a bit of research when I was writing this particular recipe, and I found that almost every version of this recipe that I came across uses firm tofu. And I don't understand why those recipes use firm tofu. I personally think that using firm tofu in a soup is going to be kind of gross because you're going to be eating like boiled bits of firm, like pretty toothsome tofu. Which I don't think is going to work out very well. What lots of folks I've read have said is that they use firm tofu because the firm tofu holds together better in the soup boil, which I think is not actually necessary. I don't think that you need to be careful of that. I think you can use soft tofu like we're going to use today and add it very, very late. And if you add this stuff super late, you don't need to worry about it falling apart. But that does mean, remember that soft tofu or silken tofu like this is extremely delicate. So you'll notice that I'm being very, very careful with this stuff because as soon as you be a little bit aggressive with this stuff, it absolutely starts falling apart, which I think is what lots of people are afraid of when they use soft tofu, is that you have to be extremely delicate with it. Otherwise, you'll end up with crumbled bits of tofu, which is not a good thing. So to that end, we're not going to do any kind of draining or aggressive tossing with our tofu. We're just going to set it aside in a bowl. And this is going to go in very, very late. We're going to add this tofu in at the very, very end because it is super, super delicate. So we don't want to throw this stuff in too early because if you throw it in super, super early, or if you throw it in too early at all while you're still stirring the soup pot, it will start to crumble. And then you're going to have bits of tofu. Not attractive. Cool. The guy who's saying, yeah, so the feel it's still track behind my voiceover is a remix. So that's actually Portugal the Man. That's the original vocal stem. Which I didn't know, but that's a dude singing. Yeah. Stinky tofu, ooh, yeah. I haven't taken a shot at stinky tofu yet. I've also never been a huge fan of it because it's really smelly. But I have lots of friends that love that stuff. They swear by it. Alright, so next up we're going to be using some bamboo shoots here today. Normally I like using fresh bamboo shoots, although I didn't have time to go to the store and pick up some fresh bamboo shoots. So today what we're using are canned bamboo shoots. They will be pretty much the same. I think in my experience with canned versus fresh bamboo shoots, you can taste a little bit of the canned quality in canned bamboo shoots, so you can kind of taste the tinniness that you get from the canned stuff. Which I don't think is quite as prominent when you use it in soups. So I think it's okay to use the canned stuff in soups. If I was making a stir fry, I probably would avoid the canned stuff because you can definitely taste the tinniness and like the preservatives that they use. And I would almost always, if I was doing stir fry, use fresh stuff, which is also a little bit hard to find though. So if you can't find the stuff, just leave it out. But if you can get your hands on the canned stuff, only use it in soups. Don't use it in stir fries because you will definitely taste those preservatives. Korean. Yeah, lots of people tell me I look Korean. I'm Taiwanese, Taiwanese American. But I do get Korean American quite a bit. I think it's my haircut, which is definitely a quarantine haircut. Paul, how's it going? Ooh, message retracted. How's it going, Paul? Hopefully you're still tuned in. We lost your message, though. All right, so that's our bamboo shoots. We don't have to do much. I don't have any fresh bamboo shoots, but essentially what these are is they come from the bamboo plant, but it's the very, very tip of the bamboo, so it's the part that's in the soil. And this stuff, usually what you'll find is it's boiled in some water, and then made super, super tender in that boil, and then peeled. And that's usually when they sell it, is once it's boiled and peeled, and you'll get those nice tips of the bamboo tree. And then you will find those in like Chinese grocery stores in the back section near the produce. Usually it'll be soaking in a tub of water. But the fresh bamboo tips, they have a very, very short shelf life, probably like a week, maybe no more than a week and a half. Which means that if you are looking for fresh bamboo tips, make sure that you only buy them right before you use them, which I've had fresh bamboo tips go bad, and it kind of sucks because they're a little expensive. Does the YouTube recipe have, yes, it does. Yeah, you can find the written version over on YouTube. And I actually just rolled out, oh, that's a really good point. We just rolled out the and Cook homepage, so if you're looking for the written versions, that's all over on my website, which is woocancook.com. But the YouTube version, it also has all of the written versions written out too. So if you're looking for the written stuff, I would probably start at the homepage because it's all searchable. You can look for all of that content. I'm super stoked that the website is ready to go because it took a super long time to do. I built it all myself. So also, if you find any bugs, let me know because I have not stopped finding bugs in like a week and a half of debugging that website. So if you want to help me debug that website too, definitely pop over and let me know. Okay. Right, are we done chopping veggies? I think we're done chopping veggies. All right, next up, what I'm going to do is flatten out some chicken breasts. So in the original recipe, the one that I did on YouTube, I did not flatten this out. And what I found is that it cooked very, very unevenly. So what we're going to do in order to make this shredded is we're going to add it to our boiling stock pot, which looks like this. So we have a pot of stock boiling over on the stove. And then we're going to drop it into the stock pot. Oh, I don't have a camera on over there yet. So we're going to drop that into our stock pot and we're going to let it blanch for a little while, so about 10 minutes. But the trouble with chicken breast is that it is very, very uneven. So you can probably tell that this side of the chicken breast, it is very, very thick. This side, it's very, very thin. And that's just the nature of how a chicken breast is. The physics of a chicken breast are designed is they're just very, very uneven pieces of meat. So in order to make sure that it boils evenly and doesn't take a super long time or like overcook on one side and undercook on another side, so we have to make sure that we even it out first, which I like doing just by flattening it out. Get yourself a meat mallet and flatten that stuff out. If you're going for presentation, so if we were trying to do a fillet or something, I would say don't do that because you'll notice that the whole thing just sort of like looks gross now because it's flattened chicken now. But what we're doing is we're just going to boil it, so we don't have to worry too much about presentation because it's just going into the stock pot anyway. So if we were worried about presentation, I would say do a fillet, which is to essentially butterfly it. Oh yeah, Taiwan. Yeah, Taipei. I haven't been back to Taipei in a long time now. Probably not in like 12 years, 12 or 13 years now. So it's probably changed quite a bit. Yeah, when are we getting the new webcam? We got it today, or I bought it today. So it's set up. If you are watching on Reddit and you're looking for essentially, if you're watching on Reddit, what we've been doing is over on YouTube we have a new webcam that's set up. And I've been raising money to replace the camera that goes on the stove, and that's because the stove camera is a piece of junk, and it freezes all the time. So if you've ever watched the YouTube streams and seen my face freeze, that's because the stove camera is a piece of crap. So I actually replaced it. It is set up right now. It's behind me. You can see it. It's the one that's stuck up there. That camera, it's linked to the YouTube channel, and I will be demoing it over on the YouTube channel. So I have both plugged in right now and I'm super stoked. You guys are the ones that paid for it. I actually did not spend very much money at all on it. It's all money raised by you guys. So super, super stoked. So yeah, if you want to check out like what that camera looks like, hop over to the YouTube stream because we're going to be demoing it. Which reminds me, here's the GoPro's feed. So over on the stove, we have our stock pot. This is our stock. It is boiling. This is 6 cups of stock. 8 cups of stock. It is 8 cups of stock. What I like doing is if I'm using homemade stock, which is a little bit thicker, I like using 6 cups of stock plus 2 cups of water. And that water will help thin it out a little bit, which is a little bit thicker if it's homemade. Today this is 8 cups of stock because I'm using boxed stuff because my stock isn't ready yet. I think it needs a couple more hours. And what we're going to do is we're going to let that boil for I would say that takes maybe 5-10 minutes. We're going to keep an eye on it for our chicken to boil all the way through. We want to keep an eye on that. We don't need to it for it to be thoroughly cooked through. We just need to make sure that it is completely cooked through. We don't need like super boiled piece of meat there though. All right. While that's going, let's set up our sauce. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST, Wednesday 6 p.m. PST, and new recipes coming out every Friday over on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel and checked out what's going on over there, I highly recommend it. There's lots of fun content popping up over there, including all of the recipes for almost everything that I stream. So what we're cooking today is a hot and sour soup recipe that came out last Friday, so a couple of days ago. That's over on the YouTube channel. We did that one, yeah, that was last Friday. So we're cooking through that recipe right now, which is one of my favorite soups. So if you're interested in finding stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to YouTube. Check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun stuff popping up over there, including the recipe for this soup. It is a part of a larger series that we've been doing, which is for recipes that come from the Bay Area restaurant scene. So this particular hot and sour soup comes from a restaurant here in Oakland called Shandong. Shandong's hot and sour soup, though, it does not have what we're about to use, which is shredded chicken. And that's because hot and sour soup, it is super often found as the free soup that you get with like lunch specials a lot. And that's because hot and sour soup is very cheap to make. Let's go through, not quite. Hot and sour soup is super easy to cheap to make because it is mainly made of pantry ingredients. So today we're going to be using a couple different kinds of dried mushrooms. We're also going to be using some canned bamboo shoots and a little bit of soft tofu. And traditionally in a hot and sour soup, those are the things that you would find, which makes it super cheap because it's all stuff that you can store in the pantry. In our version today, what we're going to be using is a little bit of shredded chicken, which I think gives it a little bit more heartiness, makes it a little bit more like a meal. That is not something that you would normally find in a hot and sour soup, probably because it is too expensive to add to a hot and sour soup. Way too expensive to add to a soup that you're going to give away for free. But I think it actually makes for a better soup. So, if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about hot and sour soup, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, at the very least entertaining to watch. You'll notice there's a second laptop behind me that's streaming as well. The second laptop directs to the YouTube channel. That YouTube channel is where we keep all of the live stream schedules, so if you were watching over on YouTube, you would have known a couple of weeks ago that I would be doing this stream because I keep a whole schedule, so I think there's two and a half weeks of streams populated over there. So there's a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking within the next 2 or 3 weeks. In addition to the schedule of things that I'm going to be cooking, that's also where all of the recipes live. So there's a couple of series that are going on right now. There's the one that is probably the most popular is the Chinese American Hack series, which is essentially a series where I started deconstructing foods from like really traditional Chinese or like really iconic Chinese American restaurants, so things like Panda Express and P.F. Chang's, things like that, kind of deconstructing those dishes and then reconstructing them without all of the American qualities. So I think the most recent one that I did was the Beijing beef, and I think the Chang's Mongolian beef is coming out very soon, which is going to be super fun. If you're interested in stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to the YouTube channel, checking out what's going on over there. Lots of fun content popping up, including the recipe for this dish, so super fun. We're also working our way to 2,300 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that goal, definitely hop over and check what's going on over there. We also have, we were raising money to buy a new stove cam, which we actually did last Thursday, or maybe Friday. So if you want to hop over, we're going to be demoing what that camera looks like, and so much better than the other crappy camera that I was using. So if you want to check out what that looks like. All right, so while the chicken is boiling, I'm throwing together the sauce of my soup, which I actually don't think that you need to do off heat. I think I've just gotten in a weird habit of doing this for everything that I cook. The main reason why I do this off heat is because in a wok fry it helps quite a bit because you can taste. You can stop and taste, which is not super easy to do in a wok fry otherwise, because in a wok fry things move so quickly that you won't really have an opportunity to stop and taste. But in a soup, you can actually just taste the soup stock and it would be just fine. But I've kind of just gotten into the habit of doing it off heat now, so I just do it now. But if you're in a rush or if you're just feeling lazy, you can totally just dump this stuff straight into the wok or stock pot today. So I'm starting off, that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, followed by 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. And then this is 2 tablespoons of doubanjiang. So if we're looking at hot and sour soup, this is where the hot comes from, is the doubanjiang, which is why I'm using it pretty gratuitously. So that's 2 whole tablespoons of doubanjiang. Normally when I use doubanjiang, I probably wouldn't use more than a single tablespoon. Oftentimes I use less than a tablespoon, so like half a tablespoon even, because it is very, very pungent and very, very forward in flavor. But it is one of the most critical flavors of this soup, so I think that we are going to be being a little bit more gratuitous with it will actually benefit quite a bit. Right. Next up is 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce. Paul, yeah, thanks for tuning in. What's up? So this is 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce. Dark soy sauce is not similar at all to regular soy sauce, so don't use it in the same way. You will find that dark soy sauce is a lot thicker and a lot more concentrated. So if you use it in the same way, you will absolutely over-season whatever it is that you're trying to cook up. Next up is 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, which is essentially Chinese cooking wine, or dry cooking sherry. So if you can't get your hands on Shaoxing wine, pick up some dry cooking sherry and it will essentially be the same thing. Although I do think that Shaoxing wine is going to be a lot cheaper than dry cooking sherry. Pear. Yeah, how's it going? How's it going, everyone? Hello to everyone on Reddit. It's cool. I know that lots of people are watching on Reddit right now. And hello to everyone on YouTube too. Lots of cool folks over on YouTube. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to add here, what did I just add? Oh, that was Shaoxing wine. The last thing that I'm going to add is half a teaspoon of white pepper. So white pepper I love adding to soups. This is oftentimes the thing that you will find on the Lazy Susan in Chinese restaurants. So next to the soy sauce or something, you will find it next to the soy sauce, and that's because lots of people like to add it as a final garnish to their soups when they eat their soups. White pepper, it works really, really well in marinades and sauces because it contains a large amount of MSG. Well, not a large amount, but it contains a good amount of MSG. So if you're wondering why I frequently don't use straight MSG, that's because a lot of the ingredients that I'm using today already have quite a bit of MSG, namely white pepper has a good amount of MSG in it already. But a lot of the other things that we're using also contain MSG, including the dark soy sauce, the soy sauce, probably the doubanjiang has a little bit of MSG in it. All of those things, they all have quite a bit of MSG already, so not really necessary in my experience to add straight MSG. Although if you're interested, you can totally go crazy with it. That stuff is super, super potent though, so be careful. Yeah, that's looking good. Alright, so I'm pulling my chicken out of the pot. You can tell that it looks very, very pale. This is basically just boiled chicken at this point. So not an attractive look for chicken breasts, but it will work really, really well once we start shredding it to pieces. What are we making? Yeah, recreation dictation. Hello, how's it going? Was it 5 tablespoons? I might have miscounted on the soy sauce. That's all right. I think it was more like 4, and then me thinking, well, the bottle was upside down. It'll be fine. Hello to everyone just joining. If you were just tuning in, today we're making hot and sour soup. So if you've never heard of hot and sour soup, that's because it's not usually on the menu in Chinese restaurants. It's usually the soup that you get before you eat your food. So it's like the free soup that you come get in lunch specials very, very often. Which is the reason that it comes up as a free soup so often is because it is really, really cheap to make. It is mainly made of pantry ingredients. So things like a couple types of a couple types of dried mushrooms. So we're going to be using shiitake and wood ear mushrooms today, and then a couple types of. So we're using tofu and bamboo shoots. So all of which are pantry ingredients. So we're using canned bamboo shoots. All of which are pantry, which means that you can store it for a super long time, and it will stay for a really long time, which makes it really cheap to make, and that's why they use it as the free complimentary soup so often. But what we're doing today is, what we're doing right now actually, is shredding up some chicken breast, which we're going to add as like kind of an extra source of protein, which I think helps make it a little bit more hearty and more of a meal rather than an appetizer. So not something that you traditionally will find in a hot and sour soup because it's way too expensive to add to something that's free. But I think it makes for a better meal rather than an appetizer. Yeah, what's the deal with it? Crystal, how's it going? What's the deal with the MSG? So I think I actually found my MSG, so I can. Oh, it's behind this cabinet now. There it is. All right, so we can take a look. I actually do have some MSG. I don't use it super often. So MSG, it looks like this. And it is essentially a powder, so it kind of looks like sugar almost. I'd say it looks more like sugar than it does look like salt. And it's something that you can add like in pinches, so you can take a tiny little pinch of it, similar to the way that you would take a pinch of salt or any kind of seasoning. And you can add it to things like marinades, or you can even add it to sauces. You can add it straight to your wok stir fry, and it will work really great. It is a really easy shortcut to umami. So if your dish is particularly lacking in flavor, you can add a little bit of MSG, and it's a really quick shortcut to making it taste a little bit better. It is also very pungent. So I literally have not ever used more than like 1/8 of a teaspoon of that stuff in like an entire dish, straight up like 1/8 of a teaspoon, because it is so pungent that you really don't need any more than that, and that's why it's sold in such small quantities. But I also very frequently leave it out. So you will frequently see people say that it is the most essential ingredient to Chinese food, which is actually true. You can't really make Chinese food without MSG. But I've discovered that a lot of the things that we use in Chinese cooking already have quite a bit of MSG in it. So a lot of the sauces that we use, they already contain MSG. So if you add more of it, it kind of becomes overpowering and a little bit too much. So I very frequently will leave it out. Today, namely, the main thing that contains MSG already is the white pepper that we use. That actually has quite a bit of MSG in it already. So we are technically adding MSG, but we're getting it from other sources. Yeah, Ajinomoto, that's what makes it. Actually, I recently discovered that MSG, originally it derives from kelp, sea kelp, which I didn't know that, but I saw it on, I think I saw that on a Kenji video. So, TIL. But yeah, very commonly you'll see it made by Ajinomoto. Yeah, gochujang. Yeah, so that's a good point. So lots of times, if you have trouble finding doubanjiang, doubanjiang is essentially a fermented chili paste. So if you have trouble finding it, there are a number. It's one of those ingredients. It comes up in a lot of different kinds of Asian food. Doubanjiang, it comes from Chinese food, but it actually comes up in multiple different cultures. I'd say the main one that I think is most easily substitutable is gochujang, which comes from Korean food, which is also derived from the fermentation of a chili pepper. And looks pretty similar. I'd say gochujang is a little bit thicker and a little bit more sweet. So it's got like more of a thick paste-like consistency, whereas doubanjiang is a little bit looser and has a little bit more liquid to it. But otherwise, I have switched those two out all the time. When I run out of gochujang, I use doubanjiang all the time, and when I run out of gochujang, I use doubanjiang all the time. So you can absolutely use those two interchangeably, although I would say that gochujang has a little bit more sweetness to it, so keep that in mind. If you can't find either, I've also found that miso paste is very similar. It just lacks a little bit of heat, so use something to replace some of that heat. Shout out to Isabella. How's it going, Isabella? She's your sister. Cool. Hello. How's it going, Isabella? right, so that's our chicken. We're gonna set this aside and we're gonna put this back into our pot towards the end, now that it is nice and shredded. And that's all gonna be here. It's all interchangeable. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the secrets behind cooking, is that a lot of ingredients are interchangeable. The main differences, very, very frequently you will find that the main differences are that they just come from different food cultures, which is like almost irrelevant unless you're trying to make it very, very authentic, which lots of people are. So like, if you can't find Shanghainese noodles, you could probably use fettuccine. It would probably be okay. It's not going to be the same, obviously, but it's going to be. They're still both noodles. If you can't find doubanjiang, just use gochujang. If you can't find dark soy sauce, you could use kikap manis, which comes from Thai cooking. All very, very similar, so it's still a dark kind of soy sauce with a little bit of molasses and sugar to it. All similar concepts. So don't be afraid to make substitutions. I would say the only thing that you should keep in mind is that every time that you substitute an ingredient, you get a little bit farther away from the flavor. So I actually learned this the hard way because I was making a Thai pumpkin curry, and I used way too many subs, and it just eventually started tasting like Chinese food. The first thing that I discovered is that I substituted out Thai chili for a jalapeno, which is probably okay. You'll be okay. You're still going to get a heat from it, but you're still missing quite a bit of that signature Thai heat from it in the Thai chili. And then I just kept substituting more and more stuff until I realized that we've gotten pretty far away from the original intention and flavor of pumpkin curry, which is Thai. And then it just eventually just starts leaning towards whatever cuisine that you're originally making it from. So I would say it's totally fine. Make as many substitutions as you want, especially if your end goal is to just make something that tastes good. But if you're trying to keep something if you're trying to go for the original intention of that flavor, just keep it in mind. Every time that you substitute something, you're losing a little bit. You're getting a little bit farther away from what you want it to actually taste like. Cool. You watch 5 minutes, you've learned so much. Cool, that's awesome. I'm glad that people are learning. You thought pork was in hot and sour soup. Yeah, you could use pork too. You could really use whatever you want. I think, honestly, when I've had hot and sour soup, I don't think I've ever seen it with meat in it. And I think that has to do with it just purely from the fact that hot and sour soup is usually free, and you wouldn't ever put meat in a free soup because it's way, way too expensive. So I probably have seen it with pork at some point, probably like shredded pork. Or even like pulled pork might be really good, all of which are easy, interchangeable opportunities to add some different kind of meat. Today we're using chicken breast though. Cool. Well, there's so much airtime. Yeah, I can actually answer some of these. You thought MSG is bad for you? Yeah. So MSG is bad for you in the same way that anything really bad for you. So it is really, really high in sodium. So if you have high blood pressure, don't use too much MSG. I know that I like to try and hold back on the MSG as much as I can because a lot of the food I cook is already pretty salty. So I like to try and hold back as much of the salt as I possibly can. High blood pressure also runs in my family. High blood pressure runs in most Asian families, I feel like, because Asian people eat a lot of salt. But I don't think that it's necessarily more bad for you than anything else that you cook with. So as long as you use it in moderation, you'll be fine. Hot and sour soup is not free in New York. You have to buy it. Is that a California thing? That's pretty interesting. I didn't know that. I've never gotten Chinese food in New York. That's very interesting though. Shout out to your sister Isabella. I did actually. I said hello, Isabella. Shout out to you. All right, so back over to our stove. We have our stock pot full of chicken stock boiling here, and we're gonna start adding stuff. So, best part about a soup is that there's no real timing that you have to keep in mind because it's just all gonna slow cook anyway. So we can pretty much just dump stuff in and it will be okay because it's all cooking at the same temperature. So unlike wok cooking where we have to watch what our ingredients are going in and out for timing purposes and to make sure that things are flash cooking properly, in a soup, not super important because it's all gonna get slow cooked anyway. Thanks. NYC has some good hot and sour soup, but not free. I did not know that. That's very interesting. All over California, for my whole life, I think all over the Bay Area, I've always had hot and sour soup for free. It's usually like the soup, when you order a lunch special, you get hot and sour soup. Or sometimes you get like maybe an egg drop soup, usually like cheap soups that you can make very, very cheaply. So you won't find like a Westlake soup or anything with a lot of protein in it because it's too expensive to make. But I also did not know that in New York it is very, very expensive. TIL. All right, so I'm adding my sauce plus my ginger and garlic, and then we're gonna let that bloom for a little while. Just like you would with a wok stir fry, we want to add those aromatics a little bit early so that some of those aromatic qualities can come out too. And then while that is going, let's do some mushrooms. Not do mushrooms. Yeah, drugs. All right. Yeah, do I ever put rice in soups? I feel like that is a thing from my childhood that not many other people have done. I have put rice in every soup that I have ever had, and I think that it was something that my mom just started getting me to do, mainly because I think it just helps stretch the soup. So if you order soup and you want your kids to eat less of it, so there's more for it to go around, you add a little bit of rice and it will stretch a little bit farther. And the rice is really cheap. Usually it's free sometimes, or like paid for by the pot. Which makes it like stretch a little bit farther. I don't think that that's a thing that is like very, very like traditional. I think that hot and sour soup is normally just a thing that you eat without rice. But I think that it is absolutely something that I have been doing since I was a little kid, is just adding a little bit of rice to it. Which is really, really interesting. Yeah, it is good, yeah. It is really good, but it also, like, when I told my friends that I did that, I discovered that that's not a thing. That's not a thing that Chinese people do, apparently. That's just the thing that my mom did. All right, so what we're doing is rehydrating some mushrooms here. On the left are some shiitake mushrooms, and then on the right are some wood ear mushrooms. And then I'm just adding a little bit of boiling water here until they're soaked or like thoroughly covered in water. And they should rehydrate within, I would say like maybe 5 minutes, maybe even a little bit less. Keep in mind that the thicker your dried mushrooms are, the longer it takes to rehydrate. So there are some types of shiitake mushrooms that are really, really thick, and they take a really long time to rehydrate. I'd say like almost 20 minutes sometimes. So keep that in mind. I used to rehydrate this stuff of like really, really early, like before the stream started, because it would take so long to rehydrate. And unhydrated or like underhydrated shiitake mushrooms are really unappealing because they're really, really chewy, so it's not good. But these particular shiitake mushrooms, I just found these at a like boutique mushroom shop down the street, are really, really thin, which makes it really, really easy to rehydrate. So it'll probably rehydrate within like 5 minutes, I think. Yeah, if your shiitake mushrooms are really, really thick, they will like absolutely take like half an hour. Easily can take half an hour. You'll notice that these shiitake mushrooms, they're super, super thin though. Same with these wood ear mushrooms. Actually, these are black fungus mushrooms. The thinner that they are, the faster they will rehydrate. So we could give it probably, I'm no kidding, these will rehydrate in 5 minutes, which is crazy. So, in the meantime, back over on the stove, we can take a look at our stock pot, or actually Dutch oven. We have a rolling boil going now. Really what we're looking for is to just bring out some of those aromatic qualities from our garlic and ginger. We're looking for some of that pungency, and that ought to do it. You love the website? Yeah, cool. I'm glad people have checked out the website. If you haven't yet, that website, it just came out. I think I finished it yesterday or maybe 2 days ago. So the brand new homepage for Woo Can Cook, which is at woocancook.com, has everything, like all of the content that I have been publishing. It all lives over there. It is also the home base for all of the written recipes. So actually the main reason why I made that website is that lots of people have been asking me for a place to find the written version of all of my recipes, which I have never really spent that much time doing because I never really realized that people would actually cook the things that I've been publishing, I guess. But lately people have been asking me to do that, so I put together a website. It is searchable. You can it's searchable by wildcard search, so you can like try to find, if you're looking for a thing that I published at one point and you can't remember what it looks like or what it tastes like, but you might remember like 1 or 2 words from the title or something, you can find it on the website, which is super, super cool. Yeah, what song is it? Also, in addition to all of the recipes, that's also a good place to find all of the music that lives on the Woo Can Cook channel. So there's a sister channel, it's called Woo Cooks Beats. It's the sister's channel that I started to this series, which is essentially where I've been publishing all of the solo material that I've been writing. So if you have not tuned in one of these streams before, I probably have talked about it many, many times. But before I started these streams, and before I started Woo Can Cook, I used to play music professionally. So I used to play in a band called Trace Root. During the quarantine, I started this channel, and then I also started a solo music project to keep like writing music by myself, essentially, which is called Woo Cooks Beats. Woo Cooks Beats is where all of the music that is looped underneath like my voiceover, that's where stuff lives. So there's quite a number of remixes. The one that you're listening to right now is a remix of Feel It Still, the Portugal the Man track. All of that stuff, it lives over on the Woo Cooks Beats channel, so you can find that at the website. So. Cooksbeats.com. Nope. There it is. So all that stuff, it lives over there. RKK6, yeah, how's it going? Cool. Thanks for tuning in again. That's super fun. Yeah, all that stuff, it lives over on the homepage, so if you're looking for written recipes, that all lives over there. If you haven't yet, I also recommend checking out what's going on over on YouTube. So we also concurrently live stream over on YouTube. So lots of fun content popping up over there, including the recipes, the recipe videos for all of the things that I publish. So there's lots and lots of recipe videos that have been popping up every Friday. This particular hot and sour soup was a recipe that I published last Friday. So 2-3 days ago over on the YouTube channel. It is a part of a larger Bay Area restaurant scene series that I've been doing, where I've been taking a dive and a shot at some of the foods from the restaurants here in the San Francisco Bay Area. This one in particular is from a restaurant here in Oakland called Shandong, which is really, really popular. There's another series. There's a couple of series that have been going on. There's another series that's dedicated to just reproducing foods from TV and film. And then there's another series that lots of people have been really excited about, which is essentially just reproducing foods from Chinese American, iconic Chinese American restaurants, so places like P.F. Chang's, Panda Express, stuff like that. Things that are really, really American and like not really Chinese food after a certain point. They're basically just American food. Those are really interesting to deconstruct, because usually what I'll do is I'll take a shot at like reproducing the original intention of those dishes and then remove all of the American qualities, which is always super interesting because a lot of those things are pretty much just American food, and then reassemble them using traditional Chinese approaches to things like, so really interesting because you can like reconstruct General Tso's chicken without the American qualities, which is really weird because General Tso's chicken is not Chinese at all. It's pretty much just American food. It's just fried chicken. So stuff like that, if you haven't checked it out yet, that all lives over on YouTube. I recommend checking that out if you haven't yet. It's all at youtube.com/woocancook. If you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. Good job. Cool. Yeah. Sorry, Bing is bong is, I saw you said, because he's literally answering some of your questions, but I don't know what your question was. I know that like very, very often people ask questions and I don't see it because I'm not looking. So if I miss a question, feel free to repeat it, or just keep repeating it until I answer it, because I super often will miss questions. So. All right, so you will notice that I actually didn't, we just talked through the entire duration of time in which these mushrooms have rehydrated. You'll notice that they are fully hydrated, which is crazy. I have never rehydrated mushrooms this quickly, but that's because they're really, really thin. So a shiitake mushroom normally would take 20-30 minutes before it becomes hydrated in the way that it has. But because our shiitake mushrooms today are super, super thin, they rehydrate really quickly. So let's take a look. So I would also recommend, if you're on the hunt for shiitake mushrooms or dried mushrooms in general, look for really, really thin ones because they hydrate faster. To eat the mushrooms right now? Yeah, I probably would, but I want to put them in the soup though. I'm not gonna. it's a waste of, these mushrooms are really expensive too. So I'm cutting these into strips here. We want thin strips of mushroom because they're going to go as, we want nice thin strips of pretty much everything that we're going to toss in except for our tofu. And that's going to give us a consistent bite every time that we take a bite of our soup. These mushrooms, you also notice they don't have stems either. If your mushrooms do have stems, you want to pick that stuff off because the stems are really, really chewy, so you don't want to be eating that stuff. Today, my mushrooms, they don't have very large stems, so I'm not actually picking them off. But if your shiitake mushrooms have stems, don't eat them because they're really chewy. Usually, I'm a big proponent of eating the mushrooms when mushrooms are fresh. Eat the stems. But in dry shiitake mushrooms, you don't want to eat the stems. Usually, what I'll do is I'll pick them off or I'll cut them off and I'll throw them into a stock pot. They're great for like beef stocks. When can you buy? Oh yeah, Wu Can Cook merch. That's like next on my docket. So I think if I back up enough, you can see it. So this is a Wu Can Cook apron, which I'm super, super stoked about. It has my knife on it, and it says Wu Can Cook. I'm gonna be trying to figure out how to manufacture these, and then we can sell them on the website. That will be the next big task. Is the Wu Can Cook website for merch, which is aprons. It's gonna be super fun. So you'll be able to find these aprons. Next up on my to-do list is merchandise, for sure. But also write more recipes. Cool. Hot and sour soup is one of your favorite meals. Oh yeah, thank you for checking it out. The apron looks good. Yeah, thank you. All right, so I'm just chopping up into thin slices for our mushrooms here. We don't need to get super, super specific about these. We do want to make sure that they're not too long though, so I did make the mistake when I was writing this recipe of not chopping these into thin enough strips. So we don't want these to be too long, otherwise they will be difficult to bite into. And if you have ever bitten into ever taken a spoonful of soup and discovered that it contains things that are too large to fit onto the soup spoon, that's a really, really unfortunate experience because it makes it like difficult to eat. So I'm chopping these up in half first, so I'm making sure that they're not too large to bite into, and then I'm giving them into strips. One more time. Alright, and that is our mushrooms. Yeah, thank you for finding on Spotify. That's cool. The Spotify version is actually not a remix. It features my friend Elisa's son. She's really, really talented. There's another playlist on Spotify that has this remix on it with more of Elisa's stuff. So I recommend checking out that playlist too. She's super talented. You love how uniform I chop. Yeah, I talk about that a lot. But it's super, super important to pay attention to the uniformity of how you chop things because the way that you chop things directly relates to the way that they will cook. So if you cut your things unevenly, they will also cook unevenly. So super, super important. If you have to chop slower in order to make sure, as long as you can make sure that things are chopped in an even and proportionate way. And that will just help you make sure that things cook evenly. But if you have to slow down, just slow down. I do that all the time. Don't feel obligated to cut fast. Cool. Next up, we're adding, let's pop back over to the soup bowl. So I'm dropping my mushrooms into our bowl here. Followed by our shredded chicken, which means that the only thing that we haven't added to our soup yet is our tofu. And that is very, very intentional. I'm not adding that tofu until the very, very end for a couple of reasons. So this is the soft tofu that I cut a couple of minutes minutes ago. If you were listening when I was talking about this earlier, the reason that we haven't added this stuff yet is because soft tofu is super, super delicate. So if you add this too early and you're stirring with it in the pot, it will start crumbling and it will fall apart. The other thing to remember is that no matter how hard you try, this tofu is never going to taste like anything, which is, I think, the key thing that lots of people who make vegetarian or vegan things need to learn, is that tofu, it doesn't taste like anything. Stop trying to make it taste like stuff. It just won't taste like anything. So once you admit to that, then you can work around it and use it as a protein element. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to add this towards the very, very end. It will be the literal last thing that I add, I think right before we add the cornstarch slurry. And then we will serve it, which makes the tofu, it's not going to taste like anything, but it's going to give a nice bit of texture and a lot of protein that's going to come from that tofu, which gives us all of the things that we're looking for tofu. And the flavor is going to come from everything else. So all of that slow cook, all of that mushroom, those mushrooms add a whole bunch of umami. All of the sauce that we added, all of those things, they create some of those flavors. Stop trying to make your tofu taste like stuff, though. It doesn't taste like anything. The more that you try, the more that you just make tofu gross. Yeah, ginger and garlic. It was the first two things that we put into these. Good question. There's ginger and garlic in almost everything that I cook. So back over to our stock pot. The last thing that I'm going to add here is a whole quarter cup of rice vinegar. So if you're paying attention, that is a whole lot of rice vinegar. Usually when I use rice vinegar, I'll use maybe a tablespoon or two at the most of rice vinegar. A quarter cup is the most rice vinegar I have ever added to anything. But the reason that it has so much rice vinegar in it is because the rice vinegar is where the sourness of hot and sour soup comes from. So we need to use quite a bit of it in order to make that sourness come through. Otherwise, it won't have sourness, it will just be soup. But definitely a quarter cup of rice vinegar is the most rice vinegar I have ever put in anything before. Good advice on tofu, yeah. That's one of my biggest gripes with vegetarian and like vegan recipes, is that they keep trying to reproduce the sensation of meat. But I think like if you just acknowledge the fact that maybe you're just not eating meat today, you can actually make something really, really delicious. And just stop trying to make meat substitutes. They're silly. Yeah, black or Chianti vinegar, they're very, very different. I decided not to use black vinegar in this particular recipe, mainly because I wanted to make sure that the stock didn't get too dark. The biggest difference with black vinegar or Chianti vinegar, am I pronouncing it right? I might not be pronouncing it right, is that they contain a little bit of sugar, so that they're a little bit more sweet than rice vinegar. Actually, someone asked this on YouTube too. Someone asked if you could substitute black vinegar for rice vinegar, and you totally can. But my experience with black vinegar is that it's not quite as bright and like pungent as white or rice vinegar is, which means that you're not going to get the punch that you would get from rice vinegar. So it won't be quite as sour, and it won't be quite as bright as it would be if you were using rice vinegar. So if you're okay with that, you can absolutely use black vinegar. I've found that it's a little bit more mellow because of the sugar. But also to that end, if you substitute it, would also give a nice bit of sweetness to it, so that might be cool too. The main reason that I didn't use black vinegar for this particular one is because if we used a quarter cup of black vinegar in our stock, it would turn the sauce, it would turn the stock like very, very dark colored, which it is already pretty dark. But if we used the whole quarter cup of black vinegar, it would look like a dark brown, which is not a quality about hot and sour soup that I want to look for. Delicious though, good question, yeah. Although to that end, I don't often use black vinegar and rice vinegar interchangeably. I think they taste pretty differently. I would say is if you can't get your hands on rice vinegar, just use a white vinegar, and that'd probably be the closest second thing. Sweet and sour in hot soup there, that would be very interesting. I thought about doing that. I don't actually know what that would taste like. That would be very interesting. Yeah, I actually don't know what that would taste like. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to assemble here is a cornstarch slurry. Cornstarch slurries, you will notice, come up in a lot of Chinese food, pretty much all Chinese food that is sauce-based, and that is because that's where all of the thickness of soup bases come from, or soup bases and sauce bases. It all comes from cornstarch. So it reminds me a lot of how Italian food uses pasta water, in which we cook the pasta and then we coat it, reserve the pasta water because the pasta water contains a whole bunch of starch that sheds from the pasta. That starch becomes the thing that you use to thicken up sauces, so you use it in carbonaras and bolognese, stuff like that. You use a little bit of pasta water because essentially what you're adding is a little bit of starch. So oftentimes in Italian cooking, you will see pasta water referred to as liquid gold. It's because it is how you make Italian food. Without that pasta water, you can't make thick sauces. In Chinese food, we do something very, very similar, but instead of pasta water, we use cornstarch. What I'm doing is I'm just dissolving. This is 2 tablespoons of cornstarch dissolved in water. The amount of water is not super important. What really matters is that we don't have any solid content or solid bits of cornstarch here. We just need all of this to be dissolved so that when we add it to our soup, we're not adding solid cornstarch. So our main goal is here to make sure that this cornstarch, it doesn't clump up when we add it to our soup base. And that is it. That's it for our cornstarch. Ooh, yeah. Kikat manis, yeah, very, very tasty. Kikat manis comes from Thai cooking. As far as I can tell, very, very similar to dark soy sauce. So when I did my pad see ew recipe, I used dark soy sauce instead of Kikat manis, which, as far as I could tell from research, I think they're the same thing, or at least the same thing from different cultures. So. Cool. Oh, you don't see the tom yum? Yeah, tom yum, Charlie tom yum recipe is coming up soon. I got. That's a tough one. Soup recipes are difficult. They're tricky to get right. All right, so let's move back over here. Yeah, very good point. Bobby, yeah, Bobby. So you'll notice that, like, in most of these streams, you'll notice that, like, everything that I cook that's in a wok is very, very time sensitive. So I never would take this much time in between things that I put on a wok, because once something is in a wok, because the heat is so fast, the time is very, very critical. Things cook within like 30 to 45 seconds, usually no more than a minute or a minute and a half per ingredient. In a soup, none of that really matters. We could take as much time as we want because everything is just slow cooking. So if you really wanted to, you could probably slow cook this for 5-6 hours and it would probably taste even better. And just keep adding more and more water. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to serve it after like maybe 10-15 minutes and it'll be just fine. But that's the best part about soups and slow cooked stuff like this, is that it is very insensitive to time. You can really take your time with it. You can talk. You can go and watch an episode of Seinfeld. It'll all be fine. That's the best part about soup. All right, so finally, I'm adding my cornstarch and my tofu. And remember that now that tofu is in your pot, you want to start stirring very carefully. Make sure that you don't break up that tofu. You'll also notice that I have not yet added any salt. That is very specifically intentional. And that is because we're going to wait until our sauce or our soup starts breaking down before we season with anything. That's super, super important. Remember that when you're cooking stuff that's going to reduce, that you don't want to add those seasonings until the very end. Otherwise, it will start reducing, and then you will have a very different flavor once it starts reducing. So if we were to have salted early and then tasted right now, it would have tasted very, very different because a lot of liquid would have cooked off and it would be more and more condensed. So it's really, really difficult to get a good idea of what something tastes like until it has reduced to its final stage. You don't have a wok, just a Tefal coated pan, yeah. Oh yeah, good recommendations for high heat cooking. I think like the biggest element to keep in mind when you're selecting a wok is what that wok is made of. So we want to make sure that we don't get anything that has a non-stick coating. I think that's the big thing that I like to look out for when I look for woks, is to make sure that it doesn't have a non-stick coating, because Teflon non-stick does not get very hot. So my wok is made of carbon steel, and it gets really, really hot. I also love a good stainless steel wok. I used to own a cast iron wok, which is probably like the best kind of heat retention that you'll find. It is also super, super heavy, so if you are not very strong, if you don't have a lot of arm strength, be cautious, because you're not going to be able to toss it. Like a cast iron wok will literally weigh like 30-35 pounds. So yeah, bing is bong. Yeah, I am going to put rice in this. So I'm going to serve it over rice. I think that's what I'm going to do. But I'm not actually going to put it in the soup though. I think we're going to serve it over rice. And that is a good trick to stretch a soup out. I think that's what my mom was doing when she told me to put rice in this. Yeah, carbon steel, stainless steel wok, for sure. All right, so I'm just bringing my soup back to a boil here. I think it simmered a little bit lower than I'd like. And then once it starts boiling, we can start seasoning and we'll be ready to eat. I'd also like this to be a little bit thicker, so I'm going to add a little bit more cornstarch here. Alright, so I'm adding another tablespoon of cornstarch, again dissolved in water. And that's just going to give us a little bit more thickness to our soup than we're already at. Just because I'd like this to be a little bit thicker. It's not quite as thick as I'd like. Cool. While we wait for that, let's see what people are saying. You did have deep fried tofu and General Tso's chicken. Yeah. I actually did a recipe for a deep fried tofu dish called hongsao tofu, which is like a really, really common traditional Chinese dish. There's nothing on the cutting board. It's a really, really common Chinese dish that is really, really good with a deep fry. It's super interesting too because it is actually not crispy. It's not meant to be crispy either. It's more of a tender piece of tofu, which becomes tender because it is deep fried. So, one of my favorite ways of deep frying tofu for sure is the hongsao tofu. Maybe a carbon steel is better. Yeah, I love my carbon steel. My carbon steel is super light. I think it's like less than 5 pounds. It makes it really, really easy to toss. All right, so right now I'm just waiting for my soup to come to a boil before we start cooking and seasoning. How many people are going to eat it? Yeah, that's another good thing that I love about soups is that they freeze really well. So I have been freezing a good portion of everything that I cook for my brother. He just had a baby, who is my brand new niece called Mia. I like freezing stuff. Soups freeze really, really well because they're made of basically just liquid. I'd say is like the only thing is if you are going to freeze your soup, just hold off on that tofu and then add it when you reheat it, because tofu doesn't freeze well. But everything else will freeze really great because it is just coated in water. Essentially, it's just coated in liquid. So when you reheat it, basically all you have to do is melt the water, and it reheats really great. Cool. Nice. This is coming together well. I'm going to let that reduce a little bit so we can get a little bit more thickness out of our soup today. I think usually my soups are a little bit thicker because I use homemade stock. Today we're using boxed chicken stock, which is why it's a little bit less thick. In the meantime, hello to everyone just tuning in. We're just finishing up a hot and sour soup that I've been doing, that I did a recipe for over on the YouTube channel. If you have not checked out the YouTube channel yet, I'd highly recommend it. The YouTube channel is where all of the recipes live, so everything that I cook on a live stream, it also lives in a recipe form over on the YouTube channel. So the recipe for this hot and sour soup, it came out last Friday, in which we those videos, they generally move a little bit slower and kind of talk through some of the decision making that goes behind making a hot and sour soup or making really anything that I'm cooking through. Those recipes are a little bit easier to follow too if you're looking for something that you can bookmark and follow through. That's a really great place to be. In addition to all of the recipes, that's also where the schedule of live streams live. So if you were watching over on YouTube, you would have known a couple of weeks ago that I would be cooking this on stream because it was all posted in schedule over there. Lots of fun things coming up over there. We have a whole series that's dedicated to just reproducing foods from the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where this one comes from. This is a hot and sour soup that is inspired by a restaurant here in Oakland called Shandong. Shandong's hot and sour soup is a complimentary soup. You get it with the lunch special. It's free. But it doesn't have very much protein in it, which is why we're using shredded chicken, which is the main thing that I added to the original, which is from Shandong. In addition to that, there's a bunch of series that are going on over on the YouTube channel. We have a whole series that's dedicated to reproducing foods from TV and film. So I did a couple of Legend of Korra recipes that were super, super fun. And then another really fun series, which is just dedicated to reproducing Chinese American classics. So things like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, kung pao chicken, stuff like that. I've been doing a lot of stuff from like the P.F. Chang's and Panda Express menus, kind of taking a shot at some of those dishes and then deconstructing them and reconstructing them without all of the American qualities in them. And kind of taking a look at what Chinese American food would look like if it wasn't so American, which is always really fun because a lot of those things are pretty much just American food. So always fun to like deconstruct something like General Tso's chicken and reconstruct it without American qualities, because General Tso's chicken is basically just American fried chicken. It's basically just popcorn chicken with a sauce. So really interesting to assemble stuff like that because a lot of those things are not Chinese at all. So a lot of like basically the way that I look at it is kind of like taking an understanding of traditional Chinese cooking and applying it to really, really like Americanized dishes like General Tso's chicken or honey sesame chicken, stuff like that. The next one for that series coming out is the Mongolian beef from P.F. Chang's, which is going to be really interesting. Because there are a number of different ways of doing Mongolian beef that are really, really common. So if you're interested in stuff like that, hop over to YouTube, check out what's going on over there. We're working our way to 2,300 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that goal, definitely hop over and check out what's going on. New recipes, they're coming out every Friday, so this Friday coming up is a recipe for a cha ye dan, which is a Chinese marbled tea egg. You might also see it called like a marbled tea egg or a essentially a hard-boiled egg that is soaked in like a soy sauce, dark soy sauce base, and it kind of looks like marbles. So that's coming out this Friday. The Reddit video is briefly freezing every minute or so. That's probably because the internet is too slow. Sorry. That's probably because my internet is too slow. It happens all the time. I'm sorry if that's happening. I've heard that the YouTube channel doesn't freeze as much. All right. So our soup is looking good. We have a nice thick sauce base going on here. Really quick while we're doing this, I also wanted to, I should say, I wanted to give a quick shout out to all of the people who are watching on YouTube. You helped us raise over $200 to buy a new stove camera, which is the camera that's up there. It's the GoPro that's hanging from the stovetop, which is way, way better than the original camera that I was using, which is a cheap webcam. So I wanted to take a chance and show you the big difference if you're watching on YouTube. So what you're looking at right now is the GoPro feed. It is nice and clear. This is the original webcam, which is in a gooey, like a piece of crap webcam. It looks like this. So you'll notice that this webcam is a lot brighter. It's much grainier and it freezes all the time. Literally the reason that it was unplugged before the stream is because it was causing the stream to freeze. So it freezes all the time, but it is also like a lot brighter. It kind of just makes it look like I undercooked everything in the pan. And that's actually not because it's undercooked, it's because the webcam is a piece of crap. So thank you again for helping me raise the money to make this or buy this camera. It is so much better, and thank you. All right, let's go back to our GoPro. Yeah, do I have any plans of releasing a cookbook? Yeah, that's on my to-do list. I have to get funding to do it, so I'm working on a grant proposal for 10 grand. That would be for making a cookbook, and I think my plan is to make a cookbook that is paired with like a music playlist, and I'm trying to figure out what that's going to look like. But as soon as I figure that out, yeah, that's what that grant proposal is going to be for, is to help make a cookbook for like the intersection of music and food. I think that's the plan. As soon as I figure out what that looks like. So that's going to come up pretty soon. Excuse me while I reboot this camera. That's going to come up pretty soon. I have to figure out what that's going to look like and how to kind of achieve a concept like that. So I think it will be something along the lines of like a cookbook that is paired with like some kind of playlist or some kind of music, and like I'm thinking like a playlist that is paired with or like a recipe that is paired with a playlist that you can listen to while you cook, which is I think my idea. Excited for the tea eggs. Yeah, I'm really excited for those tea eggs too. Tea eggs are things that I've been eating since I was a little kid. I've been eating those for as long as I can remember. And for as long as I can remember, they have never looked like marble eggs. They've always just looked like brown eggs. And I think I figured out while I was doing that recipe is the reason that they look like brown eggs instead of marble eggs is that when my mom was making those, she never really cared about what they look like. It's just that like in order to get a teenager to eat a hard-boiled egg with nothing on it is you have to make it very, very seasoned. So I think she was just putting it back into the pot after it was marbled and then just turning it completely brown. Oasis, yeah. Yeah, cool. I'm really excited for that too. Hopefully we get the funding for it, and that would be really fun. All right, let's eat. So, like we were talking about earlier, I'm going to serve this over a little bit of rice, and I really mean a very small quantity of rice. I don't like to serve too much rice with soup. This is literally half a spoonful of soup or rice. Huh? Wrong camera. So, really, really small quantity of rice here, and then we're just going to spoon a little bit of soup on top, and that is going to help stretch the soup a little bit farther, but also just like that's the way I have always eaten soup. All right, and finally, we are finishing this off with the green onions that we chopped earlier. Once again, these are not cooked at all, so I was very deliberate about making sure that these are on literally the opposite side of the kitchen as our raw chicken. Anytime that you have an ingredient that you're not going to be cooking, you want to make sure that those are very, very far away from your raw elements. Otherwise, you can definitely risk cross-contamination. That is it. Yeah, toast to soup. Yeah, I've noticed that's a thing. Or like grilled cheese. Yeah, the fun stuff coming up soon. Really excited. Really excited for the website that we just launched. If you haven't checked out the website yet, I launched that. I think that was earlier this week. Maybe that was on this weekend. Or last weekend. I think that was on Sunday maybe. So the homepage for this stream lives over on woocancook.com, which I'm super stoked is finally done. It took a while. It took me a couple weeks to finish that website. I did the whole thing myself, so hopefully if you find any bugs, just please tell me. Don't be shy about telling me about bugs. I know that there are bugs on the website. I spent about half a week trying to debug it and make sure that I cleaned out all of the bugs. But I discovered that there's really no end in sight to bugs with a website. That's forever. That's how websites are. Bugs in websites, that's forever. So yeah, the website, it's woocancook.com, so you can find that. Yeah, you got it. That's the one. Thank you, Amber. Link this over here too. The website, it has a bunch of stuff on it. It has, I think, the biggest thing that people are looking for. It has all of the written recipes. It also has a wildcard search bar. So if you can't remember exactly what the recipe was, you can look up a couple of words from the title or maybe the recipe itself, and you'll be able to track down what you're looking for. It also has a whole schedule. It has the entire schedule of everything that's coming up. That includes the live streams. It also includes everything that I'm going to be releasing in recipe form too. So it will, if you want to know what's coming up in the next couple of weeks for the recipes too, that also lives over on the Woo Can Cook homepage. That's also a good place to find some of the music that happens under this voiceover. So if you're looking for Woo Cook's beats, that also lives on the Woo Can Cook homepage too. And a whole bunch of other fun information, and there's a big FAQ section, so lots of people, they ask me very similar questions on these streams, so I answered some of those in that FAQ section. Lots of people have been asking where Sammy is. Sammy is around, he's in the FAQ section. So if you're looking for stuff like that, definitely hop over to the homepage. There's lots of fun stuff going on over there. If you haven't yet, also hop over to the YouTube channel and check out that. Lots of fun stuff popping up over on that YouTube channel, including all of the recipes for everything that I cook on stream. This particular recipe, it came out last Friday, and was part of a larger series that we've been doing, reproducing foods from the San Francisco Bay Area food scene. This one is from a restaurant here in Oakland called Shandong, which we reproduced their free hot and sour soup. And then I added a few things to make it a little bit more complex, and like hearty, which you normally would not find in a free soup because it's too expensive to do. In addition to that, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of series that are coming up on that YouTube channel. Probably the most popular one that people love is the Chinese American food hack series, in which I've been hacking a lot of the foods from places like P.F. Chang's and Panda Express, and kind of taking a look at what a Chinese American food is, and like what happened to Chinese American food when it came to America, what were like Chinese people doing to their food in order to make it so that Americans would eat it, and kind of deconstructing what those things are, and maybe like try reconstructing. Very often in those ones, I will reconstruct them a second time without all of those American qualities, and like substitute some of those American qualities like sugar and sweetness and sauce, like sauce-heavy dishes, and substitute those things with things that come from traditional Chinese cooking. So things like black vinegar, sweet chili sauce, stuff like that. A lot of things that I like using in order to substitute sweetness with things that are a little bit more like complex in sweetness and flavor, and they come from some of that traditional Chinese cooking. So if you're looking for stuff like that and you're interested in content like that, definitely hop over to YouTube, check out what's going on over there. We have new recipes. They come out every Friday. We're live streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. New recipes every Friday. And what am I forgetting to say? Oh yeah, there's a whole schedule of everything. You can find the schedule over there on YouTube. And definitely check that out. We're working our way to 2,300 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit that goal, hop over and check out what's going on. Only subscribe if you're interested, though. Don't subscribe if you're not interested. I don't like spamming people. Also, why are you subscribing if you're not interested? Weird thing to do. All right, thanks everyone. Definitely let me know if you have any more questions. I'll be here cleaning up so I can answer more questions if I miss anything. And I'll see you soon. Zapfish, yeah, thanks for tuning in. Charlie, thank you everyone on YouTube for tuning in and coming back all the time. Actually, thank you everyone on both streams for tuning in all the time and coming back all the time. It's super, super fun to see so many people coming back. Amber, I know I've seen you come up all the time. Charlie, Delicious, Zapfish, all of you folks, I know I've seen lots of people coming up all the time. So it's super, super fun to see so many people back and watching these things over and over again. We hit our donation goal a couple of days ago. I think that was last week. So thank you all for donating and helping pay for this GoPro camera that's popping up over there. I will eventually figure out something else to work towards. I think my next goal on YouTube actually will be to try and replace this YouTube camera, the one that's facing the cutting board, because you'll notice that it's quite blurry. So that's probably the next thing that I'm working towards, probably replacing and upgrading. So that will come soon. But for now, let's just celebrate the fact that we raised $200. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you soon.
Coming out of left field. Hey,